Welcome back, Focus Learners, to another edition of The Explainer. So, if you've ever tried to save money, you probably know the classic agonizing advice, right? Stop buying coffee, stop having fun, and basically just stop enjoying life for a few weeks. People try this completely miserable, no happiness plan, and inevitably they rebound so hard they end up spending even more money than before. It's literally like a crash diet for your wallet, and it just doesn't work. Well, today, we're going to break down a really fascinating approach to cutting your expenses by 30%. And we're going to do it without resorting to a restrictive lifestyle. No weird tricks like eating plain rice in the dark, just a smarter, highly effective system designed to protect the things that actually bring you joy. But first, we really need to talk about a phenomenon you are probably very familiar with. You ever have that payday moment where you tell yourself, okay, this time, I'm going to be responsible. You get paid, and for about 11 glorious minutes, you feel genuinely rich. You've got a plan. But then, a week later, you open your banking app and think, wait, where did it all mysteriously vanish to? Okay, let's dive into this because the answer to that mystery is absolutely crucial. You see, you aren't losing your money to massive, reckless buys. As the source material points out, it is quite literally death by 1,000 little swipes. It's a couple of quick delivery orders when you're just too tired to cook, a few random convenience store stops, a subscription you completely forgot even existed, and maybe a treat yourself purchase because you had an annoying day at work. Your brain immediately jumps to the conclusion, I guess I'm just bad with money. But actually, scratch that, you aren't bad with money. You are simply leaking it through minor, completely unnoticed transactions. Section 1. The payday illusion. Let's look at where it goes. And this brilliantly illustrates what's going on. If you're feeling frustrated about your finances right now, I want to completely validate that feeling by shifting the blame from a personal failure to a much wider systemic issue. It's incredibly common, and the hard data backs this up perfectly. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average U.S. household spends about $78,000 a year. Yet, Bankrate found that 34% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. That is over a third of the workforce caught in this exact same cycle of money coming in and just seemingly evaporating. And honestly, it gets even more alarming. Federal Reserve data shows that a ton of adults cannot even cover a $400 emergency using cash. No way, right? So if it feels like your money just disappears into thin air, you need to know you are for sure not alone. This is a shared reality for so many of us. But here's the fascinating twist. Fixing this widespread problem isn't about becoming some kind of math genius. It actually relies far more on human psychology than it does on purely crunching numbers. Section 2. Finding the 30% cut. We're targeting discretionary spending. So, when most people hear the phrase, cut expenses by 30%, total panic sets in. They immediately imagine having to slash their rent by a third, which is basically impossible unless you plan on moving into a literal closet. But that's a massive misunderstanding of the assignment. Let's look at how your spending is actually structured, using a hypothetical monthly income of $3,500. Your expenses basically fall into 3 buckets. First, fixed necessities, like rent and debt, taking up $2,200. Most people cannot cut these easily. Second, variable necessities, like groceries and utilities, at $700. And third, discretionary spending, eating out, subscriptions, shopping, sitting at $600. Trying to cut 30% of your total $3,500 income means finding over $1,000. That's super painful. But if you shift your paradigm and only target the discretionary and variable buckets, suddenly the math feels instantly achievable. Here is exactly how that plays out. By trimming just 30% of your discretionary spending, you save $180 a month. If you also trim just 10% from your variable necessities, that's another $70. Boom! Suddenly, you've saved $250 a month. To put that into perspective, that adds up to a massive $3,000 per year in savings, without moving, without suffering, and without canceling your entire life. Your first move here is to just look at last month's spending and identify exactly how much of it was in that optional discretionary bucket. Section 3. The joy per dollar rule. Time to rate your spending. So, how do we actually choose what to cut from that discretionary bucket without feeling totally miserable? Well, the psychological truth is that people don't really miss the act of spending money itself. What they miss are the feelings that the spending brings. The comfort, the convenience, the sense of reward, or just the escape. Enter the ultimate cheat code, the joy per dollar rule. This is a brilliant system to rate your discretionary spending by asking 3 simple questions about every single purchase. How much joy does it give you? How much does it cost? And how often does it happen? By filtering your expenses through this lens, you give yourself permission to cut the low-joy items while fiercely protecting the high-joy items. That way, your brain stays happy and cooperative.
Now, what's really interesting when we compare these two is seeing this rule in action. On one side, we have a food delivery habit, ordering twice a week at $18 a pop. That's $144 a month, happening 8 times. But honestly, by the time it arrives lukewarm, it's maybe a 6 out of 10 on the joy scale. On the other side, a streaming service. It costs just $15 a month, you use it every single day, and it gives you an 8 out of 10 joy level. Which one should you cut? I mean, it's obvious. You cut the high-frequency, low-joy takeout, not the low-cost thing you absolutely love. You are just cutting the stuff you barely even enjoy anyway.
Section 4. Plugging the spending leaks. Let's stop the slow drain. Once you've identified what actually brings you joy, it's time to transition to the execution phase. We need to plug the specific, sneaky areas where your money quietly slips away, simply because it's just too easy to spend it. A lack of friction in our daily transactions is absolutely the enemy of a healthy budget. The source material identifies what they call the big 5 leaks. First, convenience spending, like quick coffee stops or delivery. Convenience literally charges you a premium simply for being tired. Second, subscription creep, those free trials and small app charges that quietly stack up. Third, impulses. These are often those "I deserve this" identity purchases made in the heat of the moment. Fourth, transportation leaks, like taking extra trips or buying overpriced gas station snacks. And finally, food decisions. When you're tired and hungry, your brain always defaults to the fastest, most expensive option. So how do we actually plug these leaks? We replace the need for willpower with practical friction and structural defaults. Step 1, separate your accounts. Get one for bills, one for spending, one for savings. If it's all mixed together in one big pot, you'll never feel secure. Step 2, set weekly spending limits. Monthly budgets feel super abstract, but weekly budgets, they feel real. When your weekly discretionary cash is gone, you're done until next week. Step 3, enforce a strict 24-hour waiting rule for any unplanned purchase over $30. It's crazy, but most impulses naturally fade away if you just force a tiny delay. Section 5, the 7-day action plan, a practical starter plan for you. All of this theory is fantastic, but we need to actually put it into practice. Let's move to and see how this builds effortlessly over just 1 week. Days 1 and 2. Audit last month's spending and rate your top 10 discretionary purchases using that joy per dollar rule we just talked about. Days 3 and 4. Ruthlessly cut 2 of those low joy expenses. But, and this is key, simultaneously schedule 1 weekly treat so you don't feel deprived. Days 5 through 7 are all about locking in the system. Set your weekly spending limits, add friction by removing saved credit cards from your favorite apps, and finally, move that saved money into a separate account so you actually keep it. Which brings us to the absolute core takeaway for this explainer, perfectly summarized right here. Willpower runs out. Systems don't. You know, a lot of people try to fix their money problems with brute force willpower, and let's be real, it almost never works. Real wealth isn't about perfectly mimicking those extravagant lifestyles you see on social media. Real wealth is about having breathing room. It's about not panicking when a random bill shows up. When you build the right systems, cutting your expenses by 30% feels way less like deprivation and more like you finally stopped paying for things you didn't even want in the first place. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to reflect on today. Which category is stealing your money? Is it the convenience delivery, the hidden subscriptions, or maybe those "I deserve this" impulse shopping trips? Take a hard look at your leaks. If you are going to try this 7-day plan, drop a comment below with 30% and tell us which category you're targeting first. And hey, if you want more practical, monk-free money strategies that actually empower you to understand your finances better, make sure you subscribe. Because remember, the goal isn't to feel poor, the goal is to spend smarter. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.